Restaurant serves Mediterranean and medical info. So I'm a male, and when I was in my 20s, I worked as a cashier for a fast casual restaurant in the New Orleans suburbs known for vaguely Mediterranean cuisine. Its name rhymes with Bowie's Ditchin. There were multiple locations in the area, but the one I worked at was in probably the toniest neighborhood in Jefferson Parish, County, for non-Louisianians Old Metairie. Old Metairie was, well, old. It had been a streetcar suburb of New Orleans 100 years ago and was where a lot of old money ended up moving in the mid-20th century if they wanted to actually still have a chance of locals considering them in. The social scene in this city is fascinating in the most old-school way. It's only vaguely relevant to this story, but this is the neighborhood I grew up in too. I'm in my 30s now, but at the time of the story, I'm in my late 20s and still in university. I struggled a lot as a teen and young adult because I'd been diagnosed with autism fairly late in high school, and my parents weren't the best at understanding what that meant. Let me note, they are not bad people, and I don't want anyone to get that idea. At the time, I was working two jobs, a full-time floor coordinator at a high-end salon, where I ended up getting sexually harassed by the supposedly straight owner eventually, and a part-time position with this restaurant. Together, this was just enough to pay my bills and keep a roof over my head and food on my plate. Now, generally speaking, I believe that being open and honest about my autism is a net good. I'm very high-functioning but still struggle in a few places, some of which I may be able to overcome and some of which I may have to accept and live with as part of me. As such, everyone I've worked for since my mid-20s has been made aware of it, though I don't claim it as a disability. It's just some helpful info, like telling people you're hard of hearing in one ear so they don't think you're ignoring them. Now, the actual story. Because there were multiple locations in the area and we took phone orders, we would occasionally get calls from people who'd called the wrong location. This was mostly easy to sort out, except for one particular other location. Remember how I said the neighborhood was called Old Metairie? Well, we also had a location in Metairie. As such, you can imagine that a lot of people would only vaguely register what we said when we answered the phone, and our costs on waste for this must have been higher than average, but this was above my pay grade to worry about. What was my pay grade was dealing with the irate customers, so I came up with a fairly clever, if silly, way to combat this. When I would answer the phone, my personal script was, "Hi, this is Bowie's Ditchin in Old Metairie on Old Metairie Road. How can I help you?" Now, the street we were on was actually just called Metairie Road, but I'd add the extra old to give the customers a double hint, and honestly, most of the time it worked really well, until a Karen called one night. So we're fairly busy this evening, but not slammed. I'm handling the takeout register tonight, which means I'm on phones too. Now, I'm actually a really good customer service worker, but I'm the sort that needs their manager's faith and support. My service mantra is, the customer may not always be right, but the customer must always feel respected. But I also know that respect is a two-way street. In other words, I'm no doormat. So the phone rings and I answer it, delivering my usual script greeting, only to have about 3 full beats of dead silence before, "I'm sorry, where?" I can hear the woman's distaste in her voice and my warning flags immediately go up, but I politely repeat myself more slowly because I do speak quickly sometimes, and with a bit of an accent so I understand. She replies with, "Why are you calling it that? That's not the name of the street. You sound dumb saying it like that." And me, in my perennially hopeful head, think I'll just explain it to her. I've actually explained it before to regulars, and they'd always complimented me on it being a fairly simple but clever way to avoid confusion. So I tell her, "I'm sorry, ma'am. We get a lot of call-in orders for the other Metairie location, and I came up with this way of answering as a way to help make sure customers know if they've got the wrong number." Again, I may be autistic, but I'm from New Orleans. Customer service is in our blood. She apparently wasn't impressed with my ingenuity, however, and continued to insult me and my script. I politely interjected and asked if she'd like to place a to-go order, and she begrudgingly put in her order, actually returning to her insults afterward before I thanked her politely and ended the call. Of course, this being a to-go order, it meant there was a pretty high likelihood that she'd be the one picking it up. Normally, this isn't a very complicated thing. We'd stage the orders with their tickets taped to the bags so that the order names were clearly visible, and basically operated on an honor system if the orders were prepaid. Otherwise, it was a fairly quick matter to pull up the order and run the customer's card. Well, Karen in this case decided it was not going to be quick as she felt that her opinion on my phone script was of vital importance to management. So she marches in and is actually much younger than I expected, probably in her 30s at the time. Since I work at a high-end salon for my main job, I immediately make her for someone who spends at least 3 figures per month on her hair alone, no judgment. But I also tag her as new money, which means she's flashing a ton of expensive jewelry and designer, everything with logo prints, etc. I greet her, and immediately she asks who she'd spoken to on the phone. I reply that it was probably me, given that I don't know which order she's here to pick up yet. She proceeds to look at me for another couple beats and then snidely remarks that I shouldn't answer the phone like that because it makes me sound stupid. I thank her for her input and, even though I now know who she is, ask her what name her order is under. Apparently, my attitude demanded further commentary, however, as she demanded to speak to my supervisor. Now, for reasons you'll shortly learn, I liked my supervisor much more than my managers. I'd actually protected her from an abusive customer several months prior, before she'd been promoted, and we had a really good and open working relationship. She received the customer's commentary and, knowing why I answered the phone as I did, reiterated this reasoning. The customer was unable to comprehend this and continued to insist that it sounded stupid and dumb and made the restaurant look bad. By then, I'd handed the transaction off to my supervisor and turned my back to the counter to focus on some situ work while she handled it, as it was nearing the end of my shift. Eventually, she left, but that wasn't the end of it. Shocker. She called back twice that evening, once while I was still there, and once after my shift had ended, demanding to speak to a manager as she felt my supervisor hadn't adequately handled the matter, i.e., she hadn't told me to change my script. I don't remember precisely the order of the next few events, but, in essence, what happened was the following and told to me by my supervisor a month or so later. First, the customer did eventually get in touch with my manager. Apparently, she pulled the same BS with her, basically insisting that I sounded dumb, stupid, etc. answering the phone like that. My God, I wish I had this woman's free time, and essentially would not take no for an answer. My manager was an okay manager until it came to any kind of crunch, and then she tended to fold or foist blame onto other people, so she wouldn't be the target anymore. Well, in this case, she decided that the best way to get this lady to leave her alone was to apologize on my behalf and tell her I had autism. Yes, you read that correctly. My manager disclosed my private medical information to a customer so that the customer would leave her alone. Now I realize that some folks might think this is a gray area because of how open I am about my diagnosis, but as a rule I do not use my neurodivergence as an excuse, and it is my choice who is told. I'm very proud that I'm able to speak about my autism in a positive way to people, and having it be used as an excuse for perfectly rational behavior without my consent was an outrage to me. But here's the thing, it actually gets worse. Remember that I mentioned my supervisor was the one who clued me in on this? Well, she only found out about it because her position required her to attend managers' meetings. In a particular meeting, this customer apparently came up because even after all that she'd also emailed a formal complaint about me to corporate. Now did they sarcastically dismiss the ravings of a mad Karen and move on to more important things? Of course not. Apparently corporate management, the regional manager, and my manager all spend the next 5 or so minutes mocking me, and neuro-D folks in general, questioning my diagnosis, discussing whether I had anything else wrong with me, and just in general being absolutely vile, disgusting sacks of humanity. Now, if you're hoping they got what was coming to them, I'm afraid I must disappoint. As far as I knew at the time, there was no proof that this conversation had occurred, despite Louisiana being a single consent state. And I was also in a very bad place mentally. I didn't know it, but I was at the beginning of a slide in my relationship with my family that eventually resulted in me having a total mental breakdown and my going NC and moving to another state. One of the things that eventually led to this was the fact that my parents generally disregarded and invalidated my concerns/feelings when I told them about very real offenses, such as a university professor conspiring with another student to stalk me and the aforementioned sexual harassment by the salon owner. I just didn't have the fight left in me at that point to try and go after the company, despite there being numerous other violations I'd witnessed and far more easily proven: illegal dumping to waterways, numerous OSHA violations, open sewer pipes, ambient noise violations, etc., health code violations, state labor law violations, wage theft, etc. So they got away with it, and I eventually quit a year or so before COVID. I'm in a much better place now, with a good government job and relatively stable life, and having read enough of these entries on this subreddit, I felt like I should share a few of mine.